Welcome everybody. So what we're going to do today is we are going to, you're going to get your next big homework assignment, and that homework assignment is going to be another discussion. We've been talking about social issues of computer science, and so what you guys are going to do is you're going to get a scavenger hunt, okay? So you're going to have a week to find examples of a lot of the different things that we talked about in this class. So you're going to find an example of algorithmic bias. You're going to find an example of a cognitive bias, a fallacy, and so on and so forth. So the lecture today is going to be just kind of going over some of that stuff. Framing, we'll finish off framing. We didn't quite get to the end of that one last time. And then your assignment will be to go online and find people making those mistakes in the wild. I don't want you, like, every time I give this assignment, I'm like, I don't know, find an example of the sunk cost fallacy or something, right? The sunk cost fallacy is like people will keep doing the same thing because they've invested so much time in it, even if it would be optimal for them to just bail out, right? Well, we've tried making the restaurant work so far, and I know there's a coronavirus, and I know it's costing us $11,000 a month in rent. You know, we've been here for 9 months. We're going to keep at it. Yeah, sunk cost fallacy, right? So that would be an example. So if you could find an example of somebody engaging in the sunk cost fallacy online, a news story, on social media, anything like that, then that would be, you would just post you write a little paragraph. Why is it a sunk cost fallacy? Post a URL to it, and then that'd be one of your examples. What I don't want you to do is this, and this happens every time I give this assignment. Student goes like this. All right, sunk cost fallacy. You know, and they're like, all right, you know, and they just click on a link and they just like, here, I'll just send that over. This is not an example of, you know what I mean? Like they'll just either post the definition, they'll post the Wikipedia page with, you know, the definition on it. No, don't do that. Okay. What I want is, you know, or they go over here and they'll say, a sunk cost is a cost that has already been paid for. It cannot be recovered in any way. And then the URL is just like a dictionary. No. I want you to find an actual real case of one of these things out there, of people actually doing it. I don't want some dictionary definition. I know what the dictionary definition is. You don't need to repeat it to me. Okay, I want you to find actual examples from real life of people doing a fallacy, a cognitive bias, the algorithmic bias that we talked about last week, those kinds of things. Okay, so cyberpunk, yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. So there's lots of cognitive biases, by the way, even some we haven't talked about, but I want you to just go over the cognitive biases that we've talked about. So survivorship bias is, yeah, I'll just go over these again real fast. Sunk cost fallacy we just talked about. It's when you keep doing something because you invested so much in it instead of walking away. Cyberpunk would be a great example of that. Survivorship bias is when you only look at people that succeed and not people that fail and draw conclusions from that. You know, if you know, you look at famous musicians, they'll say, well, if you want to be a famous musician, you have to quit your day job and just go all in on the music thing. Yeah, that might, you know, it might be necessary in order to become a full-time musician, but in general, that's a bad life decision because there's not that many spots available for full-time musicians, right? There's a lot of spots available for computer science majors, right? You know, quitting your day job to become, you know, a computer science major is probably a good life decision. But, you know, when all you do is look at the people who succeeded in the music world and you don't interview the people that failed at it, you get what's called a survivorship bias. you'll oftentimes get bad advice. There's just not that many spots available for people to succeed at music. In fact, that's actually a real... one of my students was a manager at Pismo's, I think, and the fish place. And he quit computer science to stay as a manager, right? Because he had to decide between the two of those, and being a manager at a nice restaurant is, decent money, but is it as much money as you make as a computer science major? Probably not. But, there's 4 years of you having to be poor in order to start getting paid, and, he was like, no, I'll just take the job I have. And it's fair. Fair. Correlation is not causation. We've gone over that in detail, when just because two variables move together does not mean that there is a causative relationship. For example, on a line, I was debating somebody who said that because a lot of white farmers took the farms of Japanese farmers in World War II due to the Japanese internment, that the Japanese internment was caused by white farmers. And I'm like, no, that's not true. The Japanese internment, what was a racist thing, don't get me wrong, it was just a different kind of racist thing than what you're saying. And do you think that farmers in the Central Valley have the ability to get the U.S. government to imprison people? No, it's no. But this was and all my friends were sharing this meme, and I'm like, no, it's not true. I've actually researched Japanese internment. General DeWitt, the guy who was in charge of the internment efforts, was a racist, and he thought that the Japanese people were going to sabotage America, but it had nothing to do with oh, you know what, we're going to do this whole thing so that the farmers in Fresno, no, it's not even barely mentioned the farmers, and where they are, it's just there's absolutely no support for this person's thesis, and so I posted that, and it's correlation is not causation, and this and then these random weirdos on the internet are look, people with mayonnaise colored skin don't need an excuse to steal land. And I'm like, that's not even a counter argument. You have to have evidence for, you have a claim, you have evidence, and you support the claim with evidence. And you're saying, and have you ever met a farmer? They don't have mayonnaise colored skin. Trust me, even if they're white, they don't have, I don't know. The whole thing was just very frustrating to me to just see, that low level, that absence of critical thinking, online. So just because two things happen together don't mean that they're causing each other, right? There could always be some other factor that's causing it, right? Straw man fallacy, yeah. The farmers that make the laws. Yeah, it's just the people that were in on this thing, had no context for, how farming worked or, and how anything worked, And I'm like, yeah, whatever, They're like, you're mansplaining. And I'm like, women could be wrong too, dude. It's, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you're automatically right. It's so frustrating. Okay, so negative perception bias is when people get hung up on negative comments, like me on this person, accusing me of mansplaining because I dared to correct a woman that made a factually inaccurate statement. I see you're a man of culture as well. Yeah. And so people fixate a lot more on negative perception and negative feedback than on positive. And so and some, it's how cultures and how groups enforce their rules. Somebody will criticize someone. A friend of mine lives in Tokyo. I've been playing a lot of video games with him during the pandemic, and he said he was at an office, and a woman comes in. She had dyed her hair, blonde. Japanese woman dyed her hair blonde, and a lot of people in the office just remarked on it, "Oh, you have blonde hair now, look at you, And she immediately dyed her hair back the next day, because she picked up on all of the comments as no, your hair is too far out of line. And so she perceived that in a negative fashion. And, to be fair, maybe they were, but nobody said anything bad to her, right? Like, nobody said, like, hey, your hair is, like, violating the company dress code. Nope. They're just like, wow, you have blonde hair now. And some of them were like, oh, that's so neat. You dyed your hair blonde. And she was so sensitive to negative criticism. She's like, I think these people are telling me they don't like my hair. And then she dyed her hair back. Mind reading, very common. We think we know what other people are thinking when we don't. We don't have, unless they tell you, very common. Like, we think, oh, this person has said this because, they hate us or something like that. We're not telepaths. Like, maybe some of you guys are. I don't think so though. We can't read other people's minds, but we think we can. And if you act on it, and you act on what you believe you can read somebody's mind to be, and you're wrong, then you're just harming yourself all over the place, right? So they hate us because they ain't us, yeah. Right. So very common, and you can, I guess you can't use examples from your life, because any of the examples you're going to do on the scavenger hunt have to be cited. Like, you're going to have to find a URL. A URL is a hyperlink, right? I don't know, Google News, right? So, when to ignore race in the Derek Chauvin trial. Let's see. Big business is acting like a woke parallel government. Let's see. Hunter Biden has no recollection of encounter. Yeah. So let's say that there's some, cognitive bias fallacy, something like that in here. You just copy the URL and then you paste it into your discussion board response. Write a little paragraph about what cognitive bias, what fallacy is in there. Quote the sentence in question or whatever, and then post the URL. The URL is this, right? That thing there. Okay. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is the last one we're going to talk about. The Dunning-Kruger effect is it's named after the psychologist that studied it. And even though I don't know very much about it, I feel like I'm an expert on the Dunning-Kruger effect. You funny guy. Yeah. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is also known as the internet expert effect. And there's a lot of people who have Googled something one time and feel that they're absolute experts on the subject and can contradict you even though that you have a master's degree in the subject, Well, according to this website that I Googled one time, JavaScript is the best programming language. Hell no. You have no idea what you're talking about, do you think JavaScript's the best programming language? Yeah, this was literally told to me, by the way. Oh, computer science. Anyone can do that. You computer scientists are a dime a dozen. I once did an hour of code. It was pretty easy. I did a Scratch game once. That's all it is. The know-it-all. People on Twitter do that a lot. Yeah. The internet experts are like a plague on humanity, dude. Like, I don't know. What is something I'm not an expert on? Like, Hinduism or something, right? Like, I've studied it a bit. World religions really interest me. All religions interest me is probably a better way of putting that. And it's like, I'm not gonna make any sort of definitive statement on Hinduism because I just don't know enough about it, right? And so people, the Dunning-Kruger effect technically is when people overestimate their knowledge on a subject, right? Like, if you've taken one class on a subject and you think you're an expert on it, and it comes about when you're not good at, like, doing metacognition, where you look at your own thoughts and evaluate your own thoughts. And so, like this guy, he was a principal of a school, right? He was a principal of a school, and I was working on him on a business project, and we ran into a conflict. Like the product was like basically done, or at least it was ready to beta test. There's like 6 of us working on it, and he wanted more money because it was his idea. It's my idea. You guys implement it. We'll split it evenly. And then he decided that he wanted more money because his idea was so valuable. He had done nothing on the development. And he's like, well, I'll just find other programmers to implement it for me. Guess what? It's been 2 years. He still hasn't. Because guess what? Computer science is hard. Computer science people don't work for free. You know what I mean? And so, or normally when they're not morons like me and my team. So, yeah. And so he sabotaged this whole project. He could have made $1 million. I don't know. And who knows? Or probably could have been a failure. Who knows? But like none of us made any money because he pulled the plug on the thing because he had an improper understanding of how easy it is to become a programmer. They're a dime a dozen. They're just replaceable parts. Ideas. That's what's valuable. By the way, that is monstrously wrong. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Implementing ideas is hard, right? And there's so many people you will encounter in life that think they have an idea for a business, and if you guys are computer science majors, they'll want you to do it, and I'll pay you 10%. I get 90% for having the idea. You get 10% for actually doing all the work. Very common. Very common. Or 50-50 even. Whatever. Ideas are so easy to come up with. Like, I've got a notepad of, like, different business ideas and, like, game ideas and things like that I want to do. But it actually takes a long time and a lot of effort to implement them. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And so this can have real life harm. Like, he harmed himself. Like, there was absolutely no benefit to him to pull the plug. Like, it was just like, you could have had a chance to make money, and now you don't. But he was just, like, upset, because he thinks that he drastically undervalued our part, and he drastically overvalued his part due to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Right? People who know a little bit about evolution tend to be very critical, or the people that are critical of evolution tend to not actually have studied it very much, right? And same thing, like people that are critical about theology oftentimes have studied it very little. What's a good example of that? Like Ken Ham or something like that. Like there are these people that will post all these things about evolution being false, and most of it is just like incorrect. Like they studied it maybe a little bit, but haven't actually like taken a class in it or something like that. And so they just make a lot of very basic mistakes. Likewise, people like Richard Dawkins, who has written books on the subject, right? Dawkins is a famous atheist. He's one of the new atheists, and he's an evolutionary biologist, to be a bit ironic here. And so what he criticizes religious people for in the evolutionary domain, he does in the religious domain, because he doesn't really know religion very well. Like he went to like a Catholic boarding school, and based on that experience, like he thinks he knows all there is to know about religion, and just makes all these wildly wrong claims and goes around speaking on it like he's an expert, and he just really actually doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks he's an expert, but going to middle school, that's religious doesn't actually make you an expert, right? And so what actually happens is that as you learn a subject, what percentage of the subject you think you know actually goes down. It's actually really, really funny. Code's your first Hello World and wants to make a full game, yeah. Yeah. By the way, I misspelled Kruger here deliberately. Like I said, I'm an expert on the subject. See, none of you guys caught that. Kruger is a grocery store. No. Okay. All right. So here is the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know why there's. Yeah. So these are the psychologists that have studied it, and their studies are actually really, really funny. If you want to read them sometime. So, what is the difference between these guys? All pretty much the same, I guess. Okay. So what happens is that when you learn a subject a little bit, then you think you're a know-it-all, right, on a subject, and this is where most people on the internet are. It's what I call having a PhD in Google. They Google something one time, and like maybe I say that the Edo period is from 1607 to 1867, and they're like, I don't know what the Edo period is, and they go over here, they're like, what is the Edo period? I don't know what are we talking about here, man, and they see that I get the date wrong, because the Edo period is actually 1603 to 1867. Oh my gosh, look at this, you moron. You thought the Edo period was 1607. By the way, that was a mistake that I made in my speech in Japanese. I said 1607. Actually it was in the discussion afterwards, but whatever. Yeah, 1603. You moron! This guy has never heard. This didn't happen in the Japanese class. Like, everyone in there is actually nice and respectful and so forth. But this is an example of like what happens online, on the internet, all the bloody time. You make a mistake. They've never even heard of the damn thing before, and they like type it in. They're like, "Oh, you got it wrong. You're a moron. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a liar. You're a lying liar." And it's like, dude, you didn't even know what the Edo period was. Like you didn't even know what country it was from. And they just it's the peak of Mount Stupid is the internet expert zone, right? So when you've literally never studied a subject, like I've never studied Farsi or something like that, and you don't know anything about it, then you're like your confidence in it goes down. But that person who Googled something on the Edo period, which was the Tokugawa shogunate in Japanese history, right? There's a big civil war, the Sengoku Jidai, the warring states of Japan, and all the different clans fought each other, and the Tokugawa clan came out on top and unified under the Tokugawa shogunate. That's the Edo period, by the way, in case you were wondering about it. Now you can be an internet expert too. I'm kidding. But like somebody who's Googled something, or like maybe they watched like a Netflix documentary on it or something, like I don't know, like they think they're up here. Like my confidence, the confidence that I have in this subject is really high. Like I am an expert now on the Edo period, and then maybe you go out and you buy a book on it, and you realize how much you actually don't know, right? So what's really interesting about the Dunning-Kruger effect is that that your confidence in a subject actually goes down because you suddenly become aware of how big the subject is, right? In computer science, I know very little of computer science. You're like, what? I thought you were a computer science professor. I'm like, yeah, I am. It's just a gigantic field. It is a really, really big field, right? Like there are professors teaching here at Fresno State who their subject, their specialties, I don't even know what it means, right? What the hell is an L something? I actually don't know. Like, and that's like, this is my specialty. It's like, cool. And I want to ask them like what it is, because then they'll be like, why are you teaching here? But like, that's like, it's because I've done computer science enough. It actually doesn't bother me. Computer science is a giant field. Like I said, like I was studying facial recognition, and there's entire conferences on just facial recognition. There's autonomous vehicles. There's entire conferences. You can go to conferences on very specific things, and there's hundreds and hundreds of papers published on these things. Like the conferences that I judge papers for every year is just on computer science education. How do you teach computer science to students? And there's like 500 papers per conference, and there's 2 of those that I read papers for a year. Like even the field that like I'm interested in, because I actually am actually curious, like, what does it take to teach you guys well? Like there's no way you can keep up with it. So I'm on discussion forums with other professors, and we talk about different ideas and approaches to teach computer science, but there's no way that even in the thing that I'm interested in, I can stay on top of it. Let alone all the different other conferences in computer science that are all specialized in different things. Neural networks and machine learning. And who are the faculty here? Yeah, let me show you. Like, faculty directory. There you go. So game programming. Okay, I know that. All right, computer graphics. I'm not an expert in computer graphics, but ironically, Dunning-Kruger. I've done enough computer graphics to know I'm not an expert in computer graphics. You know what I mean? Like I teach it. It's part of when I teach video game development. But there's a huge amount of really cool stuff in computer graphics, and I'm like, yeah, I just try to see how other people do it and go from there. Human-computer interaction, web-based instruction. Okay, yeah, I know what all those words mean. I know what those mean. Santanu SaaS, software as a service. Okay, no, I know what the acronym means. EEG signal processing. Oh, that's cool. Processing brainwaves. That's cool. I mean, I've never done it, but at least I know the acronym. And then you've got parallel processing. That's kind of what I did. Let's see here. Robotics communication. I've never done robotics communication. But it's cool. Domain specific languages. Never done it in my life. I know what it is, but let's see if I can find some people here. Who was I looking at? Computational linguistics. L systems. Yeah, I have no idea what an L system is. And it's just like, I have a graduate degree and I've never even heard of this topic, and it's kind of like, yeah, and it doesn't even bother me because this thing here, I know what cellular automata are and I know what, algorithms are obviously. And so it's like, okay, so she probably specialized in like formal computer science, which is the math side of things, and I'm more on the programming side of things, so it doesn't bother me, because I'm pretty good at what I do, and so basically, like, as you learn a topic, you start becoming aware of how broad, how many different things are out there, and you hit the valley of despair. You're just like, man, I am a moron, I don't know anything. And then as you work at it over 4 years, 8 years, 16 years, whatever, you slowly like start learning at least the area that you're like trying to get good at. And after a while, you start feeling kind of good about yourself. For me, this was my junior year of computer science after I had, taken all of the lower division classes. I was trying to take upper division classes, and I finally felt like, what, I'm getting all right. I'm getting all right at this programming thing. And then later on, you develop a sense of mastery. And so a lot of times people say there's 10,000 hours. You have to put 10,000 hours into something to master it. It's not exactly accurate, but kind of gives you an idea of the scope of what it takes to master something. And so what the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people's confidence in a subject is oftentimes overstated, especially if you're kind of ignorant. And one of the ways that Dunning, I think it was Dunning, measured this was they sent out a survey and they asked students, do you think you're above average or below average in your discipline? And 65% of students felt like they were above average, And then they asked professors, like, compared to the other professors in your department, do you think you're a better professor than them? And 95% of professors believe that they were on the upper 50% of the department. 95% of people are above average. Do you guys understand how that's impossible, right? You survey 100 professors, 95% of them believe that they're in the upper 50th percentile, right? Which is impossible. Like, you can't all be above average, right? I don't know what the criteria would be, because, like, as far as L systems go, like, nope, I'm on the 0th percentile on that one because I don't even know what the damn thing is, But like on, I don't know, teaching programming, like, I don't know, I feel like I'm pretty good, but I don't know. I feel like I'm the best CSI 1 professor right now because I'm the only one. Right? I know how to count how much change you give a customer. That's all that matters. Yeah. Okay. So do you guys understand the Dunning-Kruger effect? Yeah. So it should not be hard for you guys to find somewhere on the interwebs an internet expert. Okay. Everyone feels like they're better until they're proven wrong. Yeah, victory by default, right? I always tell my daughter, "You're my favorite daughter." She's like, "I'm your only daughter." I'm like, yeah, so you're my favorite. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this will be could be one of the things you do on your scavenger hunt. So social media in particular is a breeding ground for fallacies, cognitive biases. I drove a Ford once; it was terrible. Are you saying all Fords are terrible? Screw you! No, man, just the one. So you meant all Fords are not terrible. You're changing your story now, yeah. And so people just misrepresent. They straw man is very easy to find. You're probably not going to find a fallacy of division or composition as easily. Denying the antecedent, affirming the consequent. Somebody on the chat channel on Discord found one. I was like, "Hey, is this a denying the antecedent fallacy?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." And so they're out there. They're out there. But strawman's an easy one to pick up. Dunning-Kruger. And so what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to find three fallacies, and then you're also gonna have to find or cognitive biases, and then you're also gonna have to find an example of algorithmic bias out there. Don't use ones that I've lectured on, because it's like, yeah, I know about them. If I've given you an example, you can't use it, right? I know about it. So, and then you'll need to find an example of framing. So, there we go. Let's finish off framing. Got 15 minutes left in class. So again, a frame is when a frame is a handle. It's a mental handle on a complex subject. It's like rather than having it like nobody has time to get a PhD in every subject, and this kind of relates to the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like, nobody has time to fully dig into every issue in the world. It's too big, right? And so, like if I was to, what mental frame do I have for Hinduism? Because like I said, I've studied it a little bit, not enough. It's like, all right, caste system, but that's not really around anymore. There's like Brahmin, and people are kind of like, parts of Brahmin that think they're independent but aren't, and there's like, I have like some general like, notions of like how it works, but I really don't know, and by having a frame, it's a simplified way of thinking about a subject, so you don't have to waste more brain cells on it, right? And so if you think of the government as, as Reagan put it, if you think of the government as part of the problem rather than as part of the solution, the most dangerous thing anybody's ever said is, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help," right? If that's your handle on how government works, then anytime, an issue comes up, it's like, do you want to expand the government or shrink the government? The writing person says, shrink the government because they're the problem, right? It's as simple, in reality, sometimes the government does help, and sometimes the government does things like the Tuskegee experiment, where they like deliberately let people have syphilis for 40 years, you know what I mean? Which is a very extreme example of it. But yeah, the government definitely does cause harm in a lot of cases, right? Not like Tuskegee level, but like, they get in the way, and, things like that. It definitely happens. And also the government can be helpful at times. It's a and on the net balance, is it helpful or harmful? Like, I don't know, man. Like, the government's gigantic. The government's a huge part of our national economy. They're involved in a lot of different things. And it's like, it would be an easy example. Like, an easy example would be like building inspections, right? Like, libertarians, I'll be critical of libertarians, because oftentimes I give them a free pass because they're ignored. Libertarians oftentimes will say, the free market will regulate itself, right? It's like if somebody builds a house and it falls down, then you can sue them and get your money back, right? Or if, a person has a reputation for building houses that fall down, then people won't buy houses from them. Trouble with that is that what happens is a lot of companies will make a new company just for building a single subdivision, right? So they make a new company, they throw up all the apartment buildings, and then they go out of business. So who are you going to sue? They're gone. The people who made it are gone. They're probably not even from the local area, right? And so you don't know who built them. The company's gone. You can't track down any of the officers. Like, who are you going to sue? And second point, if the house collapses on you and you're dead, like you can't sue anybody either, right? So, I would say, like, I would argue that building inspections would be an area where the government is helpful, because before they allow somebody to sell a house, and that is anathema to a libertarian. How dare the government stop me from selling something that I built, right? They come in and they turn the lights on and off. They inspect it, make sure it's not going to fall over. Ideally, it's not perfect. Like, my wife moved into a brand new apartment, and the plumbing wasn't hooked up, right? Like, how did that happen? Like, there was water to the kitchen sink, but like the dishwasher, you open up the dishwasher and there's just pipes in there. Like, they didn't hook up the dishwasher. The upstairs bathroom didn't work. And so I don't know how that passed inspection. The assignment is not up on Canvas yet. It will be soon. And so again, so how do you view the government? Is it big government? Is it oppressive? Is it, involved in ways like, the government in a lot of states used to prohibit interracial marriage, right? The government was involved in an area where arguably they had no business being involved in. And is that true today? Yeah, the government is involved in a heck of a lot of areas where they're not really helpful, like the whole ethanol thing, turning corn into gas. Like I read an entire book on the subject, so I'm an expert on it now. It talked about the harmful impact of ethanol, right? And how, like, it traced this whole chain of events, and like how the tortilla riots in Mexico, like 10 years ago, was a result of ethanol. And it's not like a one-to-one thing, like we're turning corn that people are going to eat into gas, so they couldn't turn corn into tortillas. No, it's this whole chain. And so, like, it's like there's corn, and then there's the corn feed that's used for cows, but then if that gets used for ethanol, then they buy white corn, but the white corn is used in Mexico to make tortillas. And so it was like this whole chain of cause and effects that resulted in tortilla prices spiking and having tortilla riots in Mexico as a result of America wanting to do ethanol. And the reason why we have ethanol in America is because corn farmers have an enormous political impact. Why? Because the first presidential elections take place in Iowa. The Iowa primaries are one of the two first primaries, and so all the presidential candidates go out there and say, "Yeah, I love ethanol," and so because it's a huge subsidy to corn farmers, and so the government will move money from one group to another group, and oftentimes when you do that in contradiction to the laws of the free market, it creates problems, right? If you put a cap on housing prices, what that does is it creates a housing shortage, right? Whereas when you do subsidies, you create surpluses. And anytime the government, put the libertarian hat on now. Anytime the government like tries doing like rent control, it goes horribly awry. It's just like the laws of supply and demand are like the laws of gravity almost. Like you can't ignore them, and a lot of politicians don't even understand them, and we'll just be like, yeah, if we just say that people can't get people can't raise prices, then that's it, mission accomplished. No, it doesn't work that way. What no corn does to tortilla prices. Don't get between me and my tacos, I'll write it too. Yeah. It's like, man, is there anything that smells as good as a freshly made tortilla? My lord. I went to elementary school in Old Town, San Diego, and there was a old historic Mexican restaurant next to the school. And when the wind blew the right way, you just smell the tortillas cooking, and I'd just be like, oh, so good. So good, but they wouldn't let you out because you're chained to the school. You're in the prison. Yeah. So anyway, and so like for example, the reason why American healthcare is so screwed up is because FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, put in a wage freeze. Right. He was trying to keep prices from moving. Again, trying to go against the laws of gravity. So he said, okay, you can't. Everybody has to pay everybody the same rate, which, I don't know how that's legal, but whatever. So he instituted a wage freeze. And so in order for one company to attract people from another company, they had to offer benefits, because benefits you could offer on top of wages. And so that's why our healthcare is tied to businesses now when there's no logical reason why they should be, is because companies started offering free healthcare. You come work for us, we'll give you free healthcare. And that's how they were luring better workers away from each other, was by offering them benefits. And so then it became established you get your healthcare through your place of business, which again, it kind of makes no sense. Like they should just pay you money and you should just buy whatever healthcare you want, right? Like it seems like that would be the most reasonable way. Or the government gives it to you, as they do in other countries, one or the other. But having your business be tied to your healthcare, it's like now people can't quit jobs because they'll die. You know, like it's not a good system, you know. And so they have to find another full-time job, and a lot of places don't offer full-time jobs, because if you offer a full-time job, you have to offer healthcare now, because they made it mandatory, right? Like so the federal government and their willingness to help said, oh well, if everybody's giving healthcare to people, let's just make it the law. And so now if you're a full-time worker, if anybody gets healthcare, everybody has to get healthcare, and that's expensive. And so people don't want to hire full-time people. Not even the federal government. The federal government, which is really big on like punishing people for hiring them more than the part-time limit, punishing them, they do it all the time. The Postal Service hires all these people part-time because they don't want to pay them healthcare, right? And all of these, you know, and all of this mess related to all of the healthcare issues in America is directly the result of the government trying to like impose a wage cap in World War II 80 years ago. You know, all these things have downstream consequences. So, you know, what the frame that you think of when it comes to government is government the problem or is it the solution? And the reality is complicated, right? Because there's definitely areas with like building inspections where I would argue at least that it's helpful, you know, because, you know, if a company goes out of business, the free market can't correct for that, you know. And there's areas where the government's been quite obviously harmful, you know, with all these like wage caps and price caps and things like that. They just completely ignore the laws of supply and demand, and it always creates either a huge surplus or a huge deficit, one or the other, depending on which way they're doing it. You know, but people don't like that complexity. People want something simple. Is government the solution? Is government the problem? And they just want a nice little handle. And I've got a briefcase here, and my briefcase says government's the problem. And I'm going to take that with me everywhere I go. And so when I go onto Facebook and somebody says, hey, the government has this new program to give free vaccines to everybody, I'm like, ha ha ha, government's the problem. And it's like, is it really though? I don't know. So, baked bread, yeah, it's good stuff. So, do you guys see what the problem is? It's like framing puts blinders on you, right? And so like my libertarian friends, they always see everything the government does in terms of the government is wrong, right? And my progressive friends see everything as like the government needs to solve this. You know, there's a problem, the government needs to solve it. You know, and they're like glasses, and that's the only way they can see through they can only see through the world in those glasses as a frame. Okay. So these are different ways of framing a problem, right? Is punching Trump supporters patriotic, or are you acting, you know, childishly? Like these are different frames for, you know, very complicated issues. And so basically my advice to you guys is, like I said, seek out sources of information that oppose what you believe. And it's very hard, like it's mentally painful, right, to like read somebody who's, you know, like you just know they're wrong, you know, but just read it anyway. And a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, some of the times at least, they will have a point. You know, you're like, I didn't think of that before. Or they might have a fact that you didn't know about because you got all of your knowledge from people that agree with you, right? So for example, all these people that were agreeing that, you know, Fresno farmers were behind Japanese internment, it's because they had a certain frame that white people are the problem and mayonnaise colored skin people, quoting, don't need an excuse to seize land from people, you know. And so the second they heard something that agreed with their frame, they're like, yeah, that's true. And anybody who disagrees is mansplaining, you know. And because they can't deal with people having a different idea. They can't deal with the idea they might be wrong. And so, college, like I said, it's where you're supposed to go to learn to think. And the best advice I can give you guys on that is just seek out different sources of information. Seek out something right wing, left wing, middle wing, upper wing, lower wing. I don't know. Just seek out different sources of information, and just try to see, because that's the best way of exposing what your viewpoint is on a subject. And so right, engaging in debate's also a really good way of seeing what your frames are. If you debate people, you have to present a claim, you have to give evidence to it, and they will pick it apart. And if you have a weak argument, it'll get picked apart. It won't feel good, right? It won't feel good, but you'll discover if your thoughts have any merit or not. You know what I mean? So, the government in a GIF. Yeah. What can you do if the solution is the problem? Yeah, I don't know, dude. I don't know. It's a complicated thing. It's like, in the Department of, I don't know, the Department of Energy is different from the Department of Education, which is different from the Department of Defense, different from the Department of State. Like, government's gigantic. You can't just come up with one word, in my opinion, to describe the whole thing. It's very complicated. So, talking with your friends on Facebook and doing so respectfully, is the best way of going about it. If you want to keep them, right? So, basically, when you talk to somebody, try to understand the frame they're coming from. Like the person who accused me of mansplaining, like, it was pretty obvious, I think, what frame she was coming from. Like, there was racism back then. Therefore, if there's any accusation of racism, it must be true. And, it's like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. No reason to be kind of a jerk to me, but I understand her frame, and it blinded her because it was racism, just a different kind of racism. You know what I mean? Like, she got just because there's different reasons why people do things, right? And so, come on, man. Yeah, the assignment we'll do in a week. Yeah. So, basically, just try to work to bridge the gap, right? Like, and like 4 or 5 people respond to me, and the best they had was like, well, the person who wrote this meme, I'm sure she did her research. She didn't post any sources. She just made an accusation that Fresno farmers were behind Japanese internment. And I guess the one evidence is that the Farm Bureau recommended internment. And so that somehow the Farm Bureau of Fresno had pull in Washington, D.C., and got FDR's like, oh, damn. Like, if the Fresno farmers are mad about this, we gotta throw all those Japanese people. Not like it doesn't even make sense if you think about it. And but that was the best they had. Is like, well, I'm sure the woman who posted this meme did her research. It's like appeal to authority, right? Fallacy, easy. A lot of ad hominems. One person just responded to all of my posts with a laugh emoji, and that's just the most frustrating thing ever. It's like they can't even like respond. Like, they don't even have anything to like respond with, but like, oh, you're disagreeing with something I believe in, I'm just gonna laugh emoji everything. It's just so ridiculous. Like, I try to avoid public areas in Facebook for exactly that reason. So, yeah. So in computer science, to tie it back into, we're in computer science 1. What does frames have to do with anything? Well, the assumptions you bring into a program, like I said, can kill people, right? And so if you're writing a program that reads in how fast the airplane's going and sets the flaps on the plane accordingly, whatever assumptions you bring in can kill people, right? So let's say that you don't need to worry about what programming language this is or anything. We're just going to say, I'll just explain it in English. So we start off by reading how fast the plane is going. If the plane is going 0, we set the flaps down to 0. They're down. If speed is 200, we set it to 50 degrees. And otherwise, we return the speed divided by 4. So if we're going 100 miles an hour, They'll be at a 25-degree angle or something like that. Okay? So what is the problem with this? The speed of the plane is 0, flaps are down. Speed of the plane is 200, flaps are up. If it's in between, it'll kind of smoothly translate between up and down. What is the problem here? What problems could you see? Let's say that 50 degrees. I don't know airplanes. I don't know if 50 degrees is at all right. You know, don't worry about that. But work with me here. You're reading how fast the plane is going from a sensor. If you're stopped, the flaps are down. If you're at 200 miles an hour, the flaps are up, which is also, I think, maybe backwards, but whatever. What bugs could there be here? It's, I don't know, the angles of the flaps. Like I said, I'm not an airplane person. I'm not going to pretend. Let's just say that part's correct. Like when you're at 200 miles an hour, the flap should be at a 50-degree angle, and when you're stopped, they're at a 0-degree angle, which is wrong, you know, based on my extensive experience with the Microsoft Flight Simulator. But that's not the point. That's not the point of this. Underflow. If you reverse, you're being taxied. Yeah. What if you're going backwards? Right? Now you're going to set the flaps to a negative angle. You know, maybe that'll break them. Right? What else? It's one of the two bugs that I put in here. What's the other bug? Social media is annoying at times. Yeah. With your friends is usually okay, but if you ever post on something that's publicly visible like that, just the worst people come out of the woodwork, you know? What if you don't reach 200? I don't know. I think the code is actually correct for between 0 and 200. You know, just for the sake of argument, it's correct for between 0 and 200. So if you had 100 miles an hour, it's 25 degrees. An airplane going reverse, left to see it. Yeah, if you have a gust of wind, this is an actual problem, by the way. There's a gust of wind, or if you just get a bad reading from your airspeed sensor, you know, which can happen. That's what caused the crashes of the 737 MAX, was that there was something that was reporting the angle of the plane, and when it iced over, it would give an erroneous thing, and then the planes would throw themselves into the ground. And it was basically all due to the software. It was a programmer that killed those people. Caused 2 planes to crash, killed hundreds of people because of a program like this. What's the other problem? One is if you get a negative value. What's the other problem? I'm telling you, this code works from between 0 miles an hour to 200. You've got negative covered. Yep, that's a bug. What's the other problem? 0 to 200 works. Negative doesn't work. Yeah, you go above it, right? So like, what if you're going at, I don't know, 800 miles an hour? Then you're going to set the flaps to a 200-degree angle. That's like this, you know? They'll probably rip themselves off and crash, right? And so, you know, the person who wrote this code, which is me, but let's just say, was just assuming the airspeed sensor is always going to give you a value from 0 to 200. They didn't consider the fact that you can sometimes get a negative value out. They didn't consider the fact that you can get a too high value out. You know, all of those things need to be considered. And that's a frame, right? It's a mental frame. Like that's their bias and prejudice coming into it. Like, I'm just going to assume it's going to give me a good value, you know, and it killed people, right? That's an actual, you know, I'm not joking right now. Like this, you know, something, I don't have their source code, so I just kind of made up something, but, you know, this function right here literally killed hundreds of people because they didn't think about the fact that a sensor could give bad readings. You know, it doesn't happen that often. About 1 out of every 100,000 flights, a Pytot tube will ice up and give bad values. But 100,000 flights isn't that many. You know, it shouldn't kill everybody on board. You know, 1 out of 100,000 flights just kills everybody. The plane flings itself into the ground, right? It's obvious in retrospect, but at the time, they just assumed they would be getting a correct value. You know, so yeah, it's you know, we'll talk about the Thera 25 next time because that's depressing enough as it is. To end on that note, so check on Canvas. I'll put up the assignment as soon as we get out of here. You'll need to find an example of algorithmic bias. You need an example of frames in action. 3 logical fallacies, people in the wild making them, or cognitive biases, one or the other. You're just going to type up a little paragraph about what they said, why it's a fallacy, why it's an algorithmic bias, why it's a frame, and then post a URL. And then the other 5 points are going to be peer reviewing another person. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go through each of their URLs and see if it does, in fact, back up what they said. And so this is good for you to reprocess all of the topics we've talked about so far in social issues in computer science, and kind of work with it and see if you actually understand it prior to the midterm next week. Next midterm is coming up, so it'll be good for you. You guys have any questions about anything? It'll be due in a week. It'll be due in a week. And so just find any examples you can find from the wild. Don't use my own examples. Don't use a dictionary. I want you to find people in real life making fallacies and things like that. It's not hard. It's really not hard. Just find any group of people talking and you will find fallacies. Coded bias at Netflix. Nice. I'll put a link to it. You only have to respond to one student. I give you guys 2 of them. Just in case one of the people, like, I don't know, posted nothing or something, I don't want you to be stuck, right, with your peer review. So I give you 2. You only have to do 1. Okay. But I would, if you have 2 people and one of them already has a response, then I would do the other one, just so that everybody gets a response to them. You can always do 2 if you want to. Midterm this upcoming Friday, not this Friday, next Friday. Maybe, no wait, what week is this? Is it week 12 now? I've lost track of time. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just committed myself to next Friday. Okay, so next Friday it is. All right, see you guys. I think it's supposed to be this Friday, but whatever. Next week. Where's the list of biases we can use? It's in the PowerPoint presentation. So it's up on Canvas.